Most people think selling is about persuasion. It isn't. Real selling happens before logic even enters the conversation. At that point, the decision is already emotionally tilted in your favor. What follows is just justification. There is a structured system behind this, a repeatable sequence that shapes attention, emotion, trust, and action. I call it the hack method. Not because it sounds clever, but because it behaves like a controlled breach of human attention and decision-making. Once you understand it, you stop selling in the traditional sense. You start engineering decisions. And this system has 4 stages. Stage 1. Hook. Capture attention or you don't exist. You don't have time anymore. Not minutes, not even seconds. You have a fraction of attention before the brain decides ignore or engage. That decision is automatic. People are overloaded with content, offers, noise, and messages. Their default state is rejection. So your first job is not to explain anything. It is to interrupt their mental pattern. A hook is not information. It is disruption. Something unexpected, something that breaks the flow of what their brain predicts. Because prediction equals autopilot, and autopilot ignores you. If you don't interrupt that autopilot in the first moments, nothing else matters. Your message is already dead. The strongest hooks usually follow a simple structure. A bold claim, a direct consequence, a personal implication, or an emotional contradiction. Something that forces the brain to stop scrolling, stop thinking, and start focusing. Once attention is captured, you don't waste it. You move immediately to the next stage. Stage 2. Adventure. Turn attention into emotional movement. Attention alone is worthless. Attention without direction collapses. So now you convert it into a narrative path, not a product explanation, not a feature list, a journey. Humans don't make decisions based on logic first. They simulate experiences. They imagine outcomes. They feel scenarios. So instead of telling someone what your product is, you place them inside a situation where the outcome matters. You make them the protagonist, and you introduce tension. What happens if they don't change? What do they gain if they do? What identity do they step into? At this stage, you are not selling a product. You are building a mental simulation where your solution becomes the bridge between a problem and a desirable future. This is why storytelling dominates selling, because stories bypass resistance. Facts trigger debate. Stories trigger participation. A good example is not explaining the product itself, but showing a scenario where its absence creates failure or discomfort, and its presence creates success or relief. Once the emotional environment is built, the audience is no longer evaluating. They are experiencing. And once they experience something internally, they begin to desire resolution. That desire is where the sale begins. But desire alone is fragile. It needs structure. Stage 3. Credibility. Turning desire into justifiable logic. At this point, something important happens in the buyer's mind. Emotion says, I want this. But identity says, can I justify this? People do not like admitting they act emotionally. They need logical cover. They need permission from reason. So your role now changes. You are no longer a storyteller. You are a credibility builder. There are 2 mechanisms that matter here. 1. Demonstration. You show, not tell. Because demonstration removes interpretation. When people see something working, doubt decreases instantly.
A product in action is more powerful than any description of it. The mind trusts what it observes more than what it hears. This is why strong marketing often relies on visible proof, before and after results, real-time usage, performance comparisons, physical validation of claims. The principle is simple. If it works in front of me, it must be real. 2. Social proof.
Humans are not independent decision makers. They are social validators. Before buying, they ask silently, "Has someone like me already done this?" If the answer is yes, resistance drops. If the answer is no, hesitation increases. So you provide evidence of others, real users, case studies, outcomes, experiences, transformations. Not generic praise, specific, believable proof. Because people don't trust claims. They trust repetition of success across multiple sources. Once credibility is established, emotional desire becomes safe, and safe desire becomes action-ready. But even then, something is missing. You still need closure. Stage 4. Close. Converting conviction into action. This is where most people fail. They build interest, they create desire, they even establish trust, but they hesitate at the final step. Closing is not pressure. Closing is removal of friction. You simplify the decision until refusing becomes harder than accepting. There are 3 mechanisms that work consistently. 1. Controlled simplicity. Too many options create paralysis. The brain avoids decisions when complexity increases. So you reduce friction. 1 clear offer. Or 3 structured options where 1 is clearly optimal. A guided choice, not an open maze. The goal is not to overwhelm. The goal is to direct. 2. Risk removal. Every purchase carries internal fear. What if it fails? What if I lose money? What if I regret it? So you eliminate risk. Guarantees are not generosity. They are psychological deactivation tools. When risk is removed, the buyer no longer protects themselves. They can finally move. 3. Urgency and scarcity. Without time pressure, decisions get postponed. Postponed decisions often become no decisions. So you introduce controlled urgency, limited time benefits, conditional bonuses, availability constraints, not manipulation, acceleration. You are forcing decision energy into the present moment, because intent decays over time. Once urgency is combined with clarity and reduced risk, hesitation collapses. And at that point, the final step is not persuasion, it is confirmation. A simple question, "How do you see this?" And then silence. Because silence forces resolution. The human brain hates unresolved tension, so it fills the gap. And most of the time, it closes itself. Final perspective. The hack method is not about forcing people to buy. It is about aligning attention, emotion, logic, and timing into a single flow. Hook controls attention. Adventure controls emotion. Credibility controls justification. Close controls action. When all 4 align, resistance becomes structurally weak. Not because people are pressured, but because they are internally convinced at multiple levels simultaneously. And that is the real mechanism behind high-level selling. Not persuasion, but controlled decision architecture.